Welcome back. Former St. Lucia High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, says the government of St. Lucia has chosen the wrong person to pick on and is sadly mistaken if it thinks he will be intimidated into submission as he vows to sue for the detention of his vehicle. Dr. Hilaire says no one will be spared in his lawsuit. Rochelle Gonzalez tells us more.
Former St. Lucia High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, may have lost the fight to prevent the detention of his vehicle, which has been the center of a long-standing controversy between him, the Alan Chastanet administration, and the Customs Department. But according to the former diplomat, the war is far from over. After a long back and forth between the parties, the vehicle was detained on the night of Thursday, the 12th of November. Whilst this was recorded as a victory for the government and the Customs Department, Dr. Hilaire stated that this act was the beginning of the end for his opponents. Giving an update on the situation, Dr. Hilaire said his lawyers served all parties involved in the vehicle detention with pre-action papers on Monday, November 23rd. This, he said, informs the Comptroller of Customs, Peter Chico, of the preliminary legal action against him in both his professional and personal capacity. He said he will not be scared into retreating.
You cannot victimize and abuse the people of the country in such a manner that there has to be a stop to it. And many average citizens suffer in this country and probably don't have the capacity to stand up. In my case, it's been done for political reasons, and I will stand up. And, you know, there is a price to pay, of course, but I will stand up and I will not be a coward in face of this action by the government and by the United Workers' Party government at that.
Dr. Hilaire said no one will be spared. All of those who played a part from the head down will feel his wrath.
It will go up to the highest level. The Prime Minister, and again, we've written to the Prime Minister indicating to him that, you know, he is involved in the abuse of public office and malfeasance in public office, and they still proceeded to take the vehicle. So he too will get his letters indicating to him that we are instituting legal action against him for abuse of public office and malfeasance in public office.
The former High Commissioner said the Comptroller of Customs made his bed, and so he will have to face the consequences of his decision. He indicated that he will have the last laugh.
Even on the day when the vehicle was taken, the lawyer served him another letter saying to him what he's doing is unconstitutional, it's illegal, and that he would be held to account in court for his actions. He made his decision and he acted accordingly. Clearly, you can see from the reaction, it was a political decision driven by political motives. The United Workers' Party and their surrogates were all over rejoicing that they had taken the vehicle. I had said to them they can come and take it whenever they want, and they've shown me they can take it. So, we will deal with it in the court of law.
Dr. Hilaire said the courts will decide how much he should be compensated for his ordeal. But he said more importantly is the statement that he is hoping to make, highlighting that public officers cannot and should not allow themselves to be used as political pawns. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
Labour Minister Stephenson King is expressing his disappointment after a number of St. Lucia nationals sent over to Canada to work on farms have reportedly left their posts and have gone away without leave.
Labour Minister Stephenson King is not impressed with the behavior of a small number of bad apples spoiling the chances for a group of hard-working individuals trying to earn an honest living. King expressed his disappointment as he announced that a group of St. Lucian men who were sent to Canada this year to be a part of the Canadian Seasonal Agricultural Farm Workers Program have abandoned their posts and are on the run hoping to blend into Canadian society illegally. In July, the last batch of workers was sent over to Canada, bringing the total number of St. Lucian workers to over 250. At the time of the send-off, King encouraged the workers to be quality ambassadors for St. Lucia, as he said the performance of the individual workers may result in the creation of fresh opportunities for even more St. Lucians. On Tuesday, King said this act serves to undo these opportunities and is not a good sign for St. Lucia.
It really taints us as a country when persons commit to participating in a program and then goes AWOL, and it reflects on the country. And in some instances, when this happens, employers more or less resort to other countries. So we have to work on that in terms of persons trying to adhere to the protocols. And I mean, the program now is offering tremendous opportunity.
King lamented the fact that the said opportunities were being discussed to make the lives of the workers easier whether they chose to stay in Canada or return home.
We have a new program which was introduced where the low-skilled program where those workers have a 2-year stint in Canada. Yesterday at the review meeting, we were discussing with the Canadians some greater opportunities in terms of the potential for workers to be able to apply for residency after a number of years. The government, on the other hand, we have put in place a number of measures to allow those workers, when they return to St. Lucia after a period of time, to be able to bring in their vehicles, their equipment, and other supplies duty-free to the country. So it's a program where there are opportunities, but we need persons who are well-behaved.
King admitted that unfortunately this behavior is nothing new.
We've always had those issues. In the period 2016 to about 2018, we didn't have anybody going missing. But in the last 2 years, we've had those occurrences, and it probably means that we need to be a lot more vigilant in deciding or selecting the quality of persons we need.
King said the number of workers that will be added to the program is expected to increase next year. St. Lucia currently has the second highest number of participants in the program within the OECS, trailing closely behind St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
The Member of Parliament for Ancillary Canaries, Dominic Fede, has leveled accusations of irresponsibility and political expediency against the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party. But on the opposite side of the House, equally damning accusations were made by Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire, who said the government response to COVID-19 has been disastrous. Let's begin with Dr. Hilaire. Dr. Ernest Hilaire was incensed when he addressed Parliament on Tuesday and spoke of the money being borrowed for COVID-19 response as being too little, too late.
And I want to state categorically that this government's response to COVID has been disastrous. Disastrous. It has been disastrous.
Dr. Hilaire says when the numbers were low, the government was quick to gloat and tout that it was an achievement of the administration. He says now that numbers are soaring, the government is removing itself from the equation and is placing the blame squarely on citizens and, in particular, Labour supporters. Dr. Hilaire spoke out against what he says is the demonizing and stigmatization of supporters of the SLP.
What is most painful about the comments from members opposite is to say openly, without any shame, in this House, which is supposed to be an honorable House, that is the Labour Party supporters who are super spreaders. For me, Mr. Speaker, this is painful. The Prime Minister himself was the cheerleader, that it is your Labour Party supporters that are the super spreaders and cause this spike. This, Mr. Speaker, is shameful, Mr. Speaker. It tells a lot about the character of the individuals who are saying it.
Pointing to an example in the region where it was disclosed that visitors coming into Barbados with a negative PCR test would test positive 4 days later, Dr. Hilaire made the case for second testing and says it is also the will of the people.
We've heard that there ought to be second testing. And again, the member from Miku South, the Prime Minister, insists there can be no more second testing. And Mr. Speaker, I heard a clip. The Minister of Health, the person who the COVID bill gives the authority, Mr. Speaker, to make orders, say we do second testing, we do third testing, we even do fourth testing in St. Lucia. And the question raised by the senator on the other side, on our side, flew completely over her head. She didn't even seem to appreciate what second testing was all about.
The MP says the borrowing of money for which approval was being sought on Tuesday is for a COVID response that has clearly gone astray. Meanwhile, Ancillary Canaries MP Dominic Fede took the opposition member and his party to task for quote-unquote putting hundreds of people at risk with its protest rally in October. Dominic Fede also gave a retort to Dr. Hilaire's criticisms of the handling of the COVID-19 response. In answer to Dr. Ernest Hilaire's assessment that the government's COVID-19 response so far has been disastrous, Dominic Fede had this to say.
The management of this pandemic, I propose to this House, has been one of the best in the Caribbean. One of the best in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, I didn't say that, but CARFA says it.
He minced no words when it came to the SLP's protest march back in October, a march that did receive approval from the Chief Medical Officer. Fede was adamant that no statements made about the recklessness of the march will be withdrawn.
Mr. Speaker, yes, the march is reckless. You do not have a march exposing hundreds of people in a pandemic because of political purposes. That is reckless and irresponsible. How are you going to control hundreds of people who are there chanting in the emotion of a political spectacle in the blazing heat of the sun? How are you going to help them to keep their mask on? What we are saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the leadership of the SLP has exposed hundreds of individuals to COVID-19. And that's what we're saying. So there's no redrawing of any statement. It is reckless. You cannot defend that.
On the issue of retesting and the call made by Dr. Hilaire, Fede argued that the measure is not a fail-safe. Furthermore, he argues that St. Lucia's protocols and Barbados's are different and present different levels of risk.
Their tourism architecture is a lot more driven by restaurants and moving about than ours, which is driven in the main by a lot of all-inclusives. When you come to a hotel in St. Lucia, that we just don't allow you to roam about, as they do in Barbados, because we believe that even if you take a second test, there's still a risk. And the medical experts are suggesting, and this is widely accepted in the medical fraternity, that even when a second test is done, there's still risk.
The Anse-Saray Canaries MP stated that the opposition continues to be reckless in words and deeds simply to score political points. The party, he says, has failed to put public interest ahead of political ambition. Leaders on opposite sides of the political divide thrashed it out on Tuesday as the House of Assembly convened a sitting of Parliament. Tuesday morning's debate centered on the borrowing of $20 million for the island's COVID-19 response project.
The St. Lucia government went to the House of Assembly on Tuesday to table a motion to borrow some $20 million from the Export-Import Bank of Taiwan for the country's COVID-19 response project. Prime Minister Alan Chastanet says the monies are merely a repurposing of a prior loan, one that was intended for the agricultural feeder roads and not additional borrowing by the government. He says the move is critical to protecting the lives and livelihoods of St. Lucians.
The priorities of the COVID-19 response project, Mr. Speaker, are to ensure the health and safety of the population, to preserve jobs and provide support to laid-off workers, to provide direct social assistance to vulnerable populations, and to stimulate the domestic economy. Mr. Speaker, the loans funds will be used to finance some of the initiatives articulated in the Social Stabilization and Economic Recovery and Resilience Plan. Mr. Speaker, the number of positive COVID-19 cases in St. Lucia is now in excess of 200. At the time we requested this finance, Mr. Speaker, we only had one positive case.
Leader of the opposition, Philip Pierre, seemed to be confused about the intentions of the funds. He says the amount of borrowing as a direct result of COVID-19 is startling.
Is it a response to COVID, the $20 million? Was it already accounted for in the budget? That means at the time of the budget, we knew there would have been COVID. Or free, whether it was a repurposing of the Taiwanese loan. We're borrowing now another $54 million for COVID response, Mr. Speaker. And that is in addition to the $81 million we did before the COVID crisis response, another $77 million from the IMF.
This is $212 million we've borrowed directly for COVID.
Pierre insisted that the people's business needs to be discussed in a more transparent manner. For the Hot 7 News, Nisha Charles reporting.
You're watching the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Still to come, Prime Minister Alan Shastney on the need for $20 million for COVID-19 response. Members of the public speak on the government's level of borrowing. And former Aviation Minister Alva Baptiste on the return of Liat to the skies.